everyone. Can everybody in the room hear me okay? Yes, all right. It's 6 o'clock, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Could I get confirmation from somebody on Zoom that we're coming through okay? Can I get maybe a thumbs up in the chat? Or yes? Wonderful. Okay, great. Apologies for the kind of condensed seating arrangement up here, but the Zoom camera only picks up so much, so we're a little cozy tonight. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Emma Overton. I'm the president of the Women's Law Society here, and I'll be the moderator for tonight's forum. On behalf of the Women's Law Society, the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, and the News Gazette, I welcome you to tonight's candidate forum for the 6th Judicial Circuit. Our candidates tonight are Democratic candidate Chad Beckett and Republican candidate Sam Limentato. Prior to tonight, we circulated a form to pre-submit questions and shared those with the candidates. We will go through those questions first and then allow for questions from the audience. The forum is being live streamed via Zoom and the recording will be posted to the Women's Law Society Facebook page afterwards. Each candidate will be given 3 minutes for an opening statement. Candidates will have 2 minutes to answer each question and 3 minutes to make a closing statement. Your statements and responses will be timed and the timekeeper up front will display the countdown cards. Candidates will kindly refrain from any negative attacks on the other candidate and will not mention the other candidate by name. We will go in alphabetical order, so Mr. Beckett will go first.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, the News Gazette, and the Women's Law Society here at the University of Illinois Law School for providing this forum for the candidates. It's important that the voters get an opportunity to see the people that they're going to elect, and we really appreciate this opportunity. My name is Chad Beckett. I am running for circuit judge. The situation that we are here is very familiar to me. Being here in room D, I spent most of my time, my first year of law school next door, I was a section C. One thing that we talked about as we were making our way through law school was all of the students who got A's were going to become professors. All the students who got B's were going to be judges, and those who got C's were going to make all the money. As luck would have it, I was a B student. I have been in practice in Champaign County at the law firm of Beckett Law Office, and it's had a number of Beckett derivative names to it over the decades. And I was born and raised here. I was born in Urbana, Carl Hospital, part of the building that doesn't even exist anymore. Lived in different houses in Champaign, Urbana, finally settled in Champaign for the latter part of my childhood, went to Champaign Central High School and met my wife, Tara Beckett, and been married with her for now 25 years. We have 2 children, Callum and Aiden, and together we've made a family and made a life here. I've been a lawyer, as I say, for 25 years now, working with my dad since, frankly, I was 16 years old. I have, in that time, had the privilege to represent thousands and thousands of people from all walks of life throughout our community in just about every situation you can think of. Civil and criminal cases, jury trials, bench trials, disputes that run the gamut from family to personal injury to probate and other matters, property disputes, transactional matters, state and federal, and at the appellate level. I was fortunate enough to appear before the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals in January and won a case for an important client. And that currency is what the bench needs. That broad range of experience, touching all those different areas of the law and having that relationship with people in our community here in Champaign-Urbana is critical as a judge. For more information about me, I encourage you to go to my website, chadbeckett.com. And I look forward to answering your questions here tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Circuit Judge Sam Limentato, and I'm pleased to be here. And I want to thank the organizers of this event, the League of Women Voters, the Women's Law Society, NAACP, and the News Gazette for sponsoring this. And I agree that the voters should know about their judiciary. And that's why I've worked so hard to make myself familiar with the people that I serve here at Champaign County. And it's been a great privilege of mine to serve the people of Champaign County for over 2 years as the actual judge doing the job. I was unanimously appointed by the bipartisan Illinois Supreme Court to fill the remaining term of Judge Heidi Ladd, and that appointment took place by order of that Illinois Supreme Court in May of 2020. I was sworn in August 3rd, 2020, and have done the job since then. In terms of my background, my parents immigrated from Italy. I'm sort of the kind of the old school American story for sure, which I'm thankful for. I didn't grow up with a lot in terms of financial means, but the examples I had of work ethic and family and the importance of serving others were an incredible treasure for me that I rely upon. Quick little story. My parents grew up only about 8 miles apart in the mountains of Sicily, one on the mountaintop, one in the valley, but they had to meet here in the United States. Thank goodness for Italian aunts who love to play matchmaker. So that's how that turned out, and that worked out very well. And in terms of our family, my wife Cindy and I am proud to have raised 5 children right here in Champaign County. While I wasn't born here in Champaign County, we chose to live here, make our home here, and to raise our 5 children. And we hope that we have raised them in such a way that they learn that service to others is the most important thing. And we're proud that they are progressing in their adulthood. They range from 4 boys and 1 girl. They range from 26 to 18. Good timing for me, no more children, all voters. And so that's worked out. And but they are choosing to serve. And we told them by leadership comes from service above all other things, service in your work, your community, and your family. And we're proud that 2 of our sons are serving in the different aspects of the United States military to serve our country. I practiced law in this town for 25 years as a small business entrepreneur. My start was here at the University of Illinois and received my education here. I also passed the Illinois CPA exam, which has turned out to be a benefit to me. And I've talked so much about family because I'm in charge of the family law division here in Champaign County. So again, I'm pleased and privileged to have this opportunity to do that. I trusted the judgment of the Illinois Supreme Court choosing me over all of their applicants. And we'll talk more about the Illinois State Bar Association evaluation, which proved that they were right. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Now we'll move on to the pre-submitted questions. So first, for Mr. Beckett, how would you prepare yourself to handle cases involving unfamiliar areas of law?
Well, there are a number of ways that we can look at it, but we start with the obvious. You start with the law and you apply the facts to the law. There are any number of areas of the law that I have already had currency with, and so there's quite a few situations where I think I'd already be somewhat comfortable. But beyond that, we have as lawyers resources that are terrific, ranging from the statutes that govern issues that will come up to the case law to actual guides that help us with different areas of the law. We have Lefebvre on criminal procedure. We have Gitlin on divorce. We have any number of different resources available. But in all of these cases, it's you do the work. You do the work. And you flesh those issues out with other people, whether it's a law clerk or with a partner. I often find myself sitting down with my partner, Andrew Beckett, who's here this evening, my law partner. And having that resource is tremendous. Having a good, solid relationship with other lawyers and being able to talk issues out, that's what prepares you.
Thank you. Next, for Mr. Limentato, what are your views on whether the courts as a whole, sorry.
You can't do the same question.
Oh, I apologize. Go ahead.
Please repeat.
Yes. How would you prepare yourself to handle cases involving unfamiliar areas of the law?
Quite a perfect example. I had a perfect example of that. When I was appointed again by the Illinois Supreme Court, the News Gazette called me on that first morning. I was to keep it quiet until all the other applicants had received the news. And the News Gazette called, and in their initial interview that I was authorized to give, they said, "How do you feel about being the presiding judge over the family law division?" And I said, surprise, because I had not practiced in my first 25 years in the area of family law. So of course, when I took over that division, the family law bar and the judge that was presiding were a little nervous how it would go. But that was a great example that I was able to turn that area around and learn very quickly how to apply it. and to apply it correctly and to move the court along in an efficient and effective manner. So I've given you a real life example as a judge of learning a new area of law, and very quickly, without missing a beat, the family law docket went on uninterrupted, and hopefully even better than when I first started.
Thank you. All right, the next question is, what are your views on whether the courts as a whole deal effectively with racial and gender bias? And Mr. Beckett, you're first. Sure. What are your views on whether the courts as a whole deal effectively with racial and gender bias?
I think that the court system can always improve. I think that it's not just the court system, it's a broader area of law enforcement that's involved in that. It can't be denied that people of color and those who find themselves outside of the mainstream don't have quite the same experience as those of us who have, for instance, just lived here for generations. It's a process, it's a problem, and it's one that needs a holistic resolution. We all have a responsibility, and the judiciary particularly has a responsibility in not just sitting back and waiting for being told what to do or what the facts are, but to go out and actually advocate and to try to get additional information whenever possible about individuals that are brought to the court.
Thank you. Mr. Limentato.
Well, of course, that we make progression to make sure as a judiciary, part of our judicial oath is to apply the law fairly and equally to each person. That is our mission, that's our endeavor. I'm not sure that we're to necessarily advocate. That's the role of the legislature, to set the pattern for us, to authorize what we do as judges. But we're to clearly make sure that every litigant appears before us is treated with respect and is treated with the ability to have equal access to the courts. That's critical. And in terms of, I get this question a lot, being the presiding judge of the Family Law Division, how about father's rights or mother's rights? Well, I always say the statute is written to address factors for a parent. There's no special rule or statute for fathers and a different rule for mothers. The factors are the same when I'm considering the best interests of children. And in terms of how I've handled that, one of the categories is sensitivity to diversity and bias. That was a category in the Illinois State Bar Association Judicial Advisory Poll. Conduct self and deal with others appropriately to reduce or eliminate conduct or words which manifest bias based on race, gender, national origin, religion, disability, age, sexual orientation, or socioeconomic status against parties, witnesses, counsel, or others. And I was pleased that I had a 96.45% rating to those who responded to the poll about me.
All right, and next question for Mr. Beckett. How do you deal with difficult people, including peers, lawyers, clients, or litigants?
Well, you start obviously every opportunity with kindness. There really is no other way to go about it. And there's sometimes it's unavoidable. You have other people that are very animated about a particular case. Oftentimes I'll be in a situation where there'll be 7 or 8 different parties, and they each have their own lawyers, and they all have a different perspective. And one will just come in just almost daggers drawn. And when you're about to appear in front of a judge, you cannot just engage in that kind of repartee. You've got to be able to have a conversation. And when you get this kind of thing happen to you, somebody writes you or calls you and says something like that, well, sometimes you just have to step back and grab a cup of coffee and reset. But remember, the thing about being a lawyer and being a judge is we represent our clients and we represent the people. We don't necessarily have any stake in what other people say about us. We have to decide, how are we going to serve them?
Thank you. Sure. How do you deal with difficult people, including peers, lawyers, clients, or litigants?
Thank you. That is something I do every day. I wish I had the luxury just to step back and get a cup of coffee when I have a courtroom full of 50 or 60 people to manage efficiently. But what I need to do there is to continue to treat people respectfully, but I set expectations from the beginning. Respect goes both ways. And when I've told litigants and attorneys that they'll get a chance, and I explain the procedures that will happen each afternoon in my courtroom, that really sets the mood. There has to be an awareness of the judge to know how you're being perceived, how others may perceive you, and to be aware of what's happening with people that are in front of you. Keeping in mind that people there, except for the weddings and adoptions, which is good news court that I'm in charge of, they're usually not there willingly, and they're there describing either the worst times of their lives that they're going through right then and there, or that they've been going through. And so knowing that a lot of people, especially self-represented litigants, which you want to give equal access to the courts, that they're nervous about going there. It would be like me trying to repair my car in front of my mechanic. There'd be a lot of laughter involved and a lot of apologies. You need to fix this. So that's an atmosphere that you can create from the bench. It's not theory. I've actually done it for more than 2 years.
Thank you.
Emma, you start alternating, who starts first? So you start with.
Oh, sure. Okay, the next question is, if you are the successful candidate, what will be of concern to you in making the transition? How will you approach those areas of concern?
Well, in my case, the transition will just flow into the same docket I have now. The litigants who've appeared before me, it'll be a smooth continuation. I'm already scheduling cases into next year, not because I presumed anything about the result, but because the business of the court and the service to the people had to continue and go forward. So the state of Illinois has already made their investment in me over the last 2 years in terms of training. The Illinois Supreme Court, in a bipartisan, unanimous manner, thought I was the best person for the job. That's been proven by the objective evidence, which is what judges have to use to decide, and through the judicial evaluations, and also the results of seeing the docket continue to progress further. So it will be the smoothest way for judicial services to continue and the best method of serving the people of Champaign County.
Well, since the Republican Supreme Court did not decide that I was the person to be given that 2 years experience, it will be a different answer for me. But nevertheless, having had a substantial and a continuing substantial experience in the family law docket, I will be hitting the ground running on day one. I've had the benefit also of, as I said, my partner Andrew Beckett and I engaging in several years worth of preparation for just this kind of an event, so that after the voters make their decision in November, if I am fortunate enough to be selected, we'll be able to transition fairly quickly so that I can hit the ground running, as I said, being able to take over the family docket.
Thank you. All right, the next question is, what were the most important cases you had as a lawyer, and why did you take the position you did in those cases?
I'll go back to one of those examples that I was talking about with difficult other attorneys. I can recall several cases, but one in particular. I was involved in a will contest in Edgar County, where there were 7 siblings fighting over mom's estate. There's several hundred acres of farmland, oil and gas issue concerns, and various liabilities. Every one of them couldn't stand the other. And mom left a will that gave some property to 2 of her children, a little more to a third, and cut the rest of them out, after having an extensive history of writing wills before that gave some to everybody and some to all and whatever. And we had people that had, these were litigants that were ranging from very simple folks to people with advanced degrees, including 2 lawyers. And they just all were at each other's throats. But throughout all of it, my client convinced me that her position was the right one. And sometimes you just have to be able to believe in your client. And when you believe in your client and you find the facts and the law that supports you, everything else falls into place. It took 9 years to resolve that estate. Had to get a wrong decision from a local judge, had to get him reversed on appeal, and then come back down and have her installed as the executor and do what needed to be done, be able to negotiate a settlement to that dispute settle mom's estate, and I made a lifelong friend in the process. And that's really the benefit of being in practice, my kind of practice. I've made thousands of friends, and I look forward to bringing that experience to the bench.
In terms of the most important cases, I ran my practice for over 25 years here in Champaign County and represented thousands of clients as well. When the question's asked, what's the most important case? Each client, that's the most important case to them. And I took every case that seriously. It's just like in the doctor says it's my routine surgery. Well, it's routine surgery when it happens to everyone else, but it's pretty major to me when it's happening to me. But some of the most important cases were sometimes the advice I gave not to proceed with a case, that the aftermath that might be come about from that, it certainly might outweigh the feeling you have of emotionally of revenge or whatever other motive that might exist there. And we're designed as a society to help one another. And yes, I didn't make any money off that advice, but that was the right advice to give, and you have to do the right thing, even if it doesn't benefit you. But I have to say, cases that stand out often involved, I dealt with personal injury cases, both on the plaintiff side and on the defense side, were those that involved a death or a very serious injury, because those are people that were in acute need and needed to be treated with compassion and understanding, but needed swift and effective and definitive and consistent representation. So I was pleased to be able to do that for so many years. And I think that's what prepared me to take the bench, because I'm providing solutions to people who appear before me each and every day. Thank you.
All right, and before we go on to the next question, could I have everyone in the room check their phones? I think there might be a ringtone going off in the background, kind of quietly. All right. Our next question, Mr. Limentato, what are your views on the need for more diversity on the bench and the manner in which the court treats members of different races?
Again, I think that we need to be conscious of it and aware of it. The Illinois Supreme Court, giving us guidance, has set committees and placed educational components for us as judges to continuously remind us of that. But that is something I take into account at all times when I'm dealing with each individual, that they each need to be treated fairly and respectfully without fear, favor, or prejudice. Each and every single person. I am still of the mindset that we need to also make sure that we are choosing the most qualified person to go in. Think about your daily life. Do you go in and bring your child to the emergency room, or ask for someone who's providing a service and ask first what their party affiliation is, or other things other than whether they are good at their job than what they're doing? We need to be conscious of it. If we can make sure that the application process is open to everyone, that is our responsibility to do that. And that's what we did as circuit judges to choose our last associate, Matt Lee, here in Champaign County. And I was part of that process, and I was glad to do that. And if he brings more diversity to the bench, then that's a great bonus as well. But certainly we were looking for the most qualified person. Thank you.
I frankly have concerns about the selection process with regard to appointed judges. When I, not for this particular position, but one before it, the person who was selected, to best of my knowledge, didn't really have any experience in state court. There were many qualified women that were part of that group as well, who did have that experience, and that has stuck with me. Now, on one hand, you can only choose amongst the pool of candidates that present themselves. But what is it that propels people to make that up, to actually go out and try to get that position? They have to believe that there's a reasonable expectation that they're going to get it. Associate circuit judges are picked by the circuits, by the circuit judges that you elect. But the elected judges oftentimes get a leg up on that process by being appointed. And it usually has been in a partisan manner. But beyond that, above all, how do we deal with the minority issue? Look at who is being incarcerated. Take a look at the mugshots just in the last 30 days. I have in Champaign County Court, in the Champaign County Jail. There is a disparity. there's a vast disparity in arrests and in how we handle the process. And fortunately, the state of Illinois is starting to do something about it. I think one of the best things that's going to help minorities is the change to the ending of the cash bail system. I think that that has the potential for bringing the kind of equality in disposition in criminal cases that has eluded us, where money is taken out of the issue and it is solely the judges who decide whether someone is an actual danger to other people or a flight risk, and not how much money do they have. Because in the end, the thing that has really been the deciding factor is money, and that needs to change.
All right, thank you. The next question, what do you see as a judge's responsibility in checking back on law enforcement abuses? Do you see police qualified immunity as immutable, or would you be willing to charge a police officer with serious crimes where guilty? Mr. Scott. Sure. What do you see as a judge's responsibility in checking back on law enforcement abuses? Do you see police qualified immunity as immutable, or would you be willing to charge a police officer with serious crimes where guilty?
The problem with that question is, unfortunately, we both are subject to ethical restraints that don't allow us to answer questions that are ones that are justiciable, things that we could possibly or likely come before us. I will say that there really needs to be meaning to the concept of no one is above the law. Whether it is cases that are brought to a judge to handle and to decide dispassionately based on the facts and the evidence, or if it is the legislature that passes the laws in the local areas of government that pass the rules that try to address those kinds of issues that you raised, or just the departments themselves that have policies that try to get to the root of those types of abuses. We all as a community have a responsibility to be part of it. As a judge, there are limits to what we can do. To a certain extent, we can't advocate, but we still have to have that belief system that we all should push forward to the betterment of all.
Well, there's an issue with the question itself. It's very important for a judge to know what their role is in our government system. We are the third branch of government, and our impartiality is the key that we have sworn an oath to. The question itself asks, are you seeing police qualified immunity as immutable, and would you be willing to charge police officers? We're not responsible for charging anyone. That's not our role as the judiciary. We're not responsible for investigating any potential crimes. I will tell you this, that I am a judge who will follow the law. That is my oath, to follow the law. But the law is established by the legislature, not the judiciary. But I will say this, if there's a law in the books and the legislature does not want it enforced, then they should repeal the law. That's why they are accountable to the voters every 2 years. But if there's a law in the books, I will make sure someone gets a fair trial. And if they're charged and that trial is properly bought, they will be prosecuted and receive a defense. And they will receive a fair trial according to the rules of evidence before me, regardless of who they are. Yes, no one's above the law, including judges, because we don't establish the law. It is up to the legislature to do that.
Thank you. The next question for Mr. Limentato. Why do you believe you received the ratings you received from those who rated you for the position of judge?
I hope and know that it's a reflection of my hard work and my education that I received here at the University of Illinois. And when it looks at it, the body of work I've actually done as a judge, because that rating didn't come at the beginning of my term, but it came after being 2 years on the bench in a very complicated area of law that's very contentious as well. I was a jury trial lawyer for my 25 years. Family law does not have a jury. I miss juries sometimes because the decisions are on me, but I understand what my role is there. And it was gratifying that in this evaluation, how it's done is the members of the Illinois State Bar Association receive these on anonymous polls. And the first question is, do you know enough about this judge or judicial candidate to rate them in these areas? And they rated in 8 different areas and giving an eventual recommendation. And in all of those areas, I scored in the high 90s or above. I had I've met all these people in the county. I've not hidden. People had no excuse for not knowing their judge in Champaign County. I've been to every group because I serve every person here at Champaign County, regardless of their political affiliation, regardless of their rules. I don't choose who comes into my courtroom. I treat them equally as they come in, and I'm pleased that the attorneys who appear before me over and over again, not just as a colleague, although that's history's there, but also as a judge for 2 years, rated me this highly, again in the high 90s. But one of the students that I met in looking at the rating said, "So you're an A+ judge." I said, "I like how you said that, so thank you." And so the Illinois Supreme Court, in a bipartisan manner, it was controlled by Democrats, unanimously appointed me. Those evaluations confirmed that their choice was right, and I'm doing the job that they hired me to do. Thank you.
One thing to be clear about, individual Supreme Court justices make recommendations about who is going to be appointed, and then it's taken to the rest of the Supreme Court. And just the same, individual lawyers who answer bar polls have their own reasons for doing what they do. And that's something to take into account when you look at the judicial poll. I was qualified. Everyone who was in this poll was qualified. And the Illinois State Bar Association has very specific guidelines about what you're supposed to say about this poll and what you're not supposed to say, what it's supposed to reflect and not supposed to reflect. If you get above 65%, you're deemed qualified. Anything more than that is potentially a mischaracterization of the poll. I'd invite people to go to my website, chadbeckett.com/poll. And there you'll see the rules, the excerpts from the ISBA judicial poll about manual about what you're supposed to take from that. And at the bottom of that is attached a article, a link to an article by Peter Rodskoff, who is an attorney, a staff attorney, a senior staff attorney for the Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission. Will you be guided by what 100, 150, or in my case, 170 lawyers say who know me? Maybe. Voters of Champaign County have never looked at that as a basis, at least not in the last 3 elections. In the last 3 elections, every judge who faced a sitting judge, every judge who faced a non-judge, I should say, in that election, found themselves not only having perhaps a better or a higher score on their judicial poll, but they also found themselves having less votes by the voters. It's a tool. It's part of the tool, but it's not everything.
Thank you. The next question is for Mr. Beckett. What do you see as the most important factors to ensuring that the judicial system works to keep our communities safe? What do you see as the most important factor to ensuring that the judicial system works to keep our communities safe?
They need to work, the judges work with a whole host of other organizations, other units of government. They work with the county board, they work with the sheriff, they work with the individual bailiffs that are in their court. And there are different ways to look at it. There's the most immediate issue. How do we keep things safe in the courtroom itself? How do we maintain order? How do we make sure that, particularly in a pandemic, that people maintain social distancing when necessary, or otherwise are able to carry on the business that brought them there? In a broader sense, as what has been said earlier tonight, judges have limits on what they can do to mandate how other people conduct themselves. They, the chief judge of the circuit has some control over how things are going to go in that courtroom. They could decertify a courthouse, or they could find that a sheriff's office has failed to maintain certain standards if a case is brought to a judge to decide. But it is true, as the third branch of government, judges are there to address actual disputes, not to go look for those disputes. They have limits on what they can do. But when they come, you can be assured that I will certainly do everything I can to keep the people of Champaign County and the community safe.
as I've been out in public, meeting again, thousands of the citizens that I serve, there's a commonality with the vast majority that they want their community safe, they want their children educated, they want to live by the rules of society, which allows everyone to prosper and to do so safely. And there may be extremes on both ends that want to create division, but certainly that community safety is involved in a highlight, sadly, in our county over the last few years with the violent crime that's taking place. Certainly people are concerned when shootings are happening in the daytime. And here's where, as a family law judge, I'm watching the deterioration of families that are taking place and have to treat it with compassion, but there's innocence involved with the best interests of children. As to the issue of community safety itself, when I saw the need, I knew that as a sitting judge, I could consider probable cause for warrants. And what I realized was, and I thought this only happened, frankly, it wouldn't happen here in our county, but judges are woken up in the middle of the night to consider that. And I said, I will work both hard inside the courthouse and outside the courthouse. So I let it be known, do not hesitate to wake me up. Do not hesitate to find me at the county fair or a restaurant, wherever I am, to consider a warrant. But I've said, if there's not probable cause, I will not sign it. If there is, then I'll consider it. And if appropriate, I will sign it. But we will not have our community placed in further danger, community safety be delayed because we're looking for a judge who's willing to do that. And I think that's the attitude of all my colleagues. So I'm very thankful to work with that group. But I've done that day in, day out.
Thank you. The next question. As a partisan political candidate for office, how will you ensure that personal political pressures will not influence your decisions as a judge? Mr. Lintott.
Well, because I'm reminded of my judicial oath, which is to follow the laws of the state of Illinois, not whether I agree with the laws of the state of Illinois. And it's regardless of my personal beliefs, regardless of my political affiliation. If the law is passed, then that is the law that is to be applied to the evidence that I hear. Again, fairly, equally, and respectfully to each person. And that's our if we lose our impartiality, and fair-minded people of both parties have made it clear to me that that's what they want above all. They want a judge who's doing the job diligently and is applying the law impartially without fear, favor, and prejudice. That's what the Illinois Supreme Court wanted in their appointee, regardless of what party, and they've appointed from both parties. And that's what the attorneys who respond and who appear before want. And that's definitely what the citizens who appear before any judge want most of all, to know they'll get a fair hearing without fear, favor, or prejudice.
In Douglas County, over the behind the bench for where the judge sits is a giant mural. It's beautiful, and it's written in Latin: "Do justice, even though the heavens may fall." And I've taken that to heart. It really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who's a Republican, who's a Democrat, who's a Green, who's a socialist, who's whatever they are. When you're wearing that robe, you have one concern: the parties in front of you, the defendant in front of you. What's going to happen to that person? Are their rights being protected? Is justice being done? I've spent 25 years ensuring that it is for everyone that I've represented and making sure that their rights are protected. I will be adamant about doing that as a judge. There will be no delay in finding me wherever I am, and I have made it known already. People will find me and I will be able to help in just about any circumstance.
Thank you. All right, in the interest of time, I think we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. And so Audrey down here has a microphone, and then Anthony over there is going to take this one. And if you just want to put your hand up, they'll come over to you.
I have no law background. I'm just a regular guy. And thank God I've never had to be in court, and hopefully I'll never have to go. But I guess my question and concern is, and there's two ways of looking at this. There's a major sea change in the law that's gonna happen, I think, on January 1st. Which is the cashless bail, I think it's called. So can you explain the cashless bail and what is, and this is for both of you, what is the good, the bad, and the ugly of the sea change?
I'll take that. It's actually much more than just cash bail. It's a giant law that covers many, many aspects of law enforcement, and it is a sea change. It is a radical change, no question about it. And we don't exactly know how it's going to turn out. There's no doubt about it. There's going to be some changes. And it's based on evidence, based on my understanding of the legislature's attempt to update a system that has not worked, and they'd like to make it work a little better. And I've had misconceptions brought to me about this many, many times. But focusing on just the cash bail question. Illinois' Constitution requires, it mandates bail in all situations except those where judges feel that that person who is being charged with a crime is a danger to others, and in very specific circumstances that are enumerated in the Constitution. We start with that. Beyond that, we have notions that date back 1,000 years about, well, if they can provide enough security, well, we'll let you stay out of jail while we wait for your trial to take place. And that has evolved to a system where the people who have the most money can stay out of jail while they wait for their charge. But that isn't really the right way to go about things. At least that's where we're going. That's where we're going as a society. The issue should be whether you have money or don't have money, whether you're black, white, whether you're a man or a woman, whoever you are you a danger? Are you dangerous to someone or people? And if you are, you need to be able to articulate that. Judges need to be able to articulate that. Or are we worried that you're going to not show up for court? If you don't satisfy those two requirements, you probably shouldn't be at liberty. But if you can, then we work under a system where people are innocent until proven guilty. And I think our citizens deserve that.
Thank you.
I, with all the other judges, take a rotation. Here in Champaign County, we actually hold bond court on the weekends. Not every county necessarily does that. Where if someone is arrested Friday night or Saturday night, then we come in and we consider the conditions for their potential release. The way cash bail works right now is you set an amount taking into account the severity, the risk to the community, the risk of flight, and the financial circumstances. The amendments of 2017 emphasize that, and that's certainly something as judges we're very aware of, that $5,000 for one person may be a fortune, but for someone else, it may be just a pittance. And there shouldn't be that disparity in that somebody who's wealthier than someone else is able to get out. And I agree, a fundamental principle of our jurisprudence is the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. But now this law, the concern is practically, it was a 746-page bill, contains a lot of things in there that may very well be positive. It's not for me to evaluate or make policy. It is to make sure that I apply it fairly and equally to each person. As the judiciary statewide, we don't know how this practically will turn out. That's where we agree. We don't know how this will turn out. I hope it benefits our society as a whole, but we're the first state to go this route with no cash bail. So there are some things to learn. There'll be 5 counties that are going to be trying this out October 1 to sort of give us hopefully some indication as to what works and what doesn't, because there's some additional requirements now that are there. And again, they may benefit, and I value that presumption of innocence. But right now, that middle ground where you can set bail and someone could get out is no longer going to be available. Either someone is detained until trial or a plea, which I'm concerned about that presumption of innocence if that happens, because they have no way of getting out otherwise, or they're released on recognizance with a promise to return. You have to balance that right of the individual with community safety, and you always have to do that.
Thank you.
I like to change the flavor of this and sort of personalize it. Let me give you an example, and I'd like to know how each of you would handle it. let's pretend for a moment that I come into your courtroom and unfortunately, I've had to go through a divorce that I had no desire for whatsoever. I am very emotional. I happen to have, say, 4 children under the age of 12. And life is going to be very, very tough for me. Do you have any words of comfort, or how would you handle a woman who is under these circumstances at that time?
All right, this is certainly something that I do encounter every day. And the courthouse is a place where really finding hope is often difficult. It's our last stop in the rules that we've made to live as a society. This example is there every day, not just of a mother, but any parent. And that's why the statutes apply, and there is that element there. But in terms of the personal level, it's what I discussed before, that you have to have compassion and kindness and recognize that they never planned to be at this point in their life. And I've used this example and explained it, and I think it resonates with people. Said this, your life is a book made up of different chapters. When you got married in this scenario, you never dreamed you'd be back in courtroom age before Judge Limentato getting a divorce 10 years later with 4 children in your example. So that chapter is not going the way you think it will be, but you have a responsibility to make the next chapter a little bit better. And more importantly, when you have a scenario with children, I remind the parents that they're co-parent together for a long time, that they've been given the opportunity to have a figurative pen in each one of their hands to write in the book of life for their children. And they are responsible for writing good chapters in that book to give their children a chance. So those are very real problems of your neighbors and your fellow residents of Champaign County. Those are real examples that happen there.
The best thing that I can say about what would happen in Judge Beckett's courtroom, it isn't going to be that I'm going to make you feel better about where you are. There are things that will happen to you that I can't fix. What I can do is I can give you a hopefully correct decision as quickly as possible. Because you've heard the phrase, justice delayed is justice denied. And unfortunately, in the situation that you described, you often find yourself in a situation where months, possibly even a year or more can go before those types of decisions can be resolved. There has to be ways to give those kinds of issues the permanency that children need as soon as is practical. It's often impossible to do that, but wherever possible, getting you out of that courtroom is every bit as important as welcoming you into it.
More than half a century ago, the case Hewitt v. Hewitt is decided by the Supreme Court of Illinois. It comes from the Champaign County, and
He was my dentist.
Yeah, it's good to know. And I believe today
He filled the cavity. I'm sorry.
the university grew unprecedentedly big. I think the number of the young cohabitants without marriage gets unprecedentedly big. So what if one day, even this is a rare case, that a pair of young cohabitants haven't get married, went to your court, demanding their equitable part of what they used to hold in common? What will we do? What would be our policy concern? What will be the factor to consider in addition to follow Hewitt v. Hewitt?
In all these matters, obviously, judges have to follow the law. The good news is there is a similar track for unmarried couples relative to the married track. You have the Marriage and Dissolution of Marriage Act, you also have the Families Act. And in both of those acts, you have the mechanism to divide property that you may have accumulated together, but with a difference. Illinois does not recognize common law marriage, as you say, even in that really unfortunate situation where I personally feel that the wife in that case had suffered a great injustice. The law has to be followed, even though the heavens may fall, and it's not the judge's job to overrule the legislature. The legislature said it's not a marriage, so it's not a marriage. So in response to that, Illinois has progressively tried to make it easier and easier for folks not in a traditional relationship to be able to solve those disputes. And it is up for judges to fill in the blanks where those happen where we can. But you've seen it as a progression. First it was with civil unions, and then it was with tearing down the gender barrier entirely for marriage. A lot of the barriers that used to be there that prevented people from making that kind of a commitment to themselves has been taken away. And I would encourage folks to embrace that. But even if they can't, even if for whatever reason they have a long relationship and they just don't ever make those kinds of bonds, they need to know that the law is there, that the judges are there to handle their disputes fairly, and that the law will be followed.
And that's really the answer is, if it's governed by statute, that's what we must follow. So if it's not addressed by the legislature, then we're not to legislate from the bench. We're to follow that law and apply it fairly and equally to every person. So that's where that goes. If there's a statute, I will correctly apply it. And the last question about providing hope, I understand I'm not a counselor. I give correct decisions. In my over 2 years on the bench, I've not been reversed on appeal once. So I'm correctly applying the law. My legal ability is there, and I will follow that law, whatever it may be. That is my firm commitment. That's my oath.
Good evening, good evening. You all talking about, gentleman earlier spoke about law that was on the book for 50 years. Of course, there was another law that was on the book for 50 years that was recently overturned. I'd like to know each of your position on Roe v. Wade and how or what impact it may have potentially on family courts.
Well, my commitment is to follow the law of the state of Illinois. The law in the state of Illinois is very clear on this issue of abortion, and that's the law I will follow.
I will also follow the law. I think it's also important to say, and even at times like these, even if this is never going to be, especially because it's probably never going to be something that I decide because the law is fairly clear, it's still important to stand up and be counted that women's rights and their ability to handle their own healthcare decisions are human rights. I don't feel that the state should, you have to get permission, a woman needs to get permission from the state to address an ectopic pregnancy or to have to deal with the horrible decisions that would follow a miscarriage that hasn't run its course. When you have a change in the law like what's happened now, you'll have hospitals refusing to do what would be routine decisions in the past to follow through with this kind of a circumstance because they're afraid they're going to get sued. They're afraid they're going to be found liable criminally or civilly. And to a certain extent, it's up to the people to correct that change that has happened in this last year. We don't know what the future holds, but I, for one, want to be on record saying that a woman's right to control her own bodily integrity is a human right.
I would have a follow-up question on that. First of all, thank you for articulating your position. So this is theoretical, because in the state of Illinois, the law is absolutely the law. So what if now, if we were in Florida, let's say the law was that it was illegal to have an abortion, let's just theorize that. Based upon your stated position, would you still apply the law as written?
Though the heavens may fall.
We're not to, ethically, we're prohibited from taking any position, which leads to the liar impartiality. That's why the rule must be, we must follow the law, and we don't make it, the legislature does.
Something which is not the law, but is court rules, has to do with pro se litigants. And I know you said most of your people are. Do you think the pro se litigants have a fair shot in our courtrooms? And what, if anything, do you think we need to do to make that process more even and smoother for people who can't afford a professional attorney?
I think that it does fall upon us as the judiciary to make that as available as possible in terms of giving everyone a fair chance in our courtroom. Now, there are resources outside of the courtroom. The Illinois Supreme Court has put incredible resources together through their website to guide a self-represented litigant through that. In Champaign County, we have a self-help desk that's there. When I have a self-represented litigant in front of me, and that's not most of them, but there's quite a few, I have to remind them that I can't serve as an attorney for either side, that I can only create a level playing field there, that they are there, they are to follow the same rules of evidence and conduct, that they're to be respectful to one another, and they're to know the law. So I do what I can to guide them to those resources to say, this might be covered best if you maybe take some time and we'll reconvene in another hearing if there's no objection from the other side to that in particular, and where you can look that up. I always, and there are other resources here in town that will really address those issues as well. But it's our responsibility to make sure that person feels like they've been heard and they've had a chance to present within that bounds of impartiality, because I can't spend someone else's currency to help out the other side. But I do need to make sure that every opportunity is there to patiently hear both sides. Even if they're not using the correct terms, I still can give weight to the evidence that they're presenting.
It's my experience that pro se litigants often are given greater latitude than those that are represented by counsel. I think there's a fairness to that, precisely because a judge's obligation is to the parties, not to whoever had the opportunity to hire the best counsel or have the best representation. More broadly, the Supreme Court has endeavored for the last several years to provide basic resources, things like pre-formatted pleadings and financial affidavits. And this has been particularly helpful in the family law area that has cut through some of the need for or some of the mystery of trying to represent yourself in a place like family court. In a broader sense, though, there's still a huge underrepresented part of our community that find themselves in court. I don't have a very good answer because it always comes back to the same thing: money. People not having good enough earnings so that they can afford good counsel, or they're not being resources enough to be able to qualify for benefits from Pili or from the Lincoln Legal Aid Society. It's been my privilege to volunteer several times for that help desk to provide at least some assistance for folks, in addition to giving pro bono services for many such clients, which I've done and I will continue to do. But there's always a need that remains to be satisfied, and judges have a role in trying to help with that.
Good evening. Thank you both for taking the time to be here tonight. And that being said, this question seems simple, but I think it goes to, why are you running, or why are you hoping to continue? Why do you want to do this? You're taking time out of your evening away from your family, using your resources. There must be a reason, and I would love to hear what both of you have to say.
Ever since I was a little boy, I wanted to be a lawyer. My dad would work late hours at his office because there weren't computers, there wasn't the internet, there were just books. And if I wanted to see my dad, who'd work really late at night most days of the week, that's where I went. I got used to it. It became everything about me. I was fortunate enough to get to the point now where he's 74 and I'm 50 and he works for me. And as part of that journey, I've spent a lot of time in court, a lot of good experiences with judges who care, who actually put in the work, and a lot of times with judges who seem like the world owes them a living. And it's been more of one than the other. I've had many great mentors as judges, but I found that there's always a need for having more judges who have that broad range of experience from their community, who actually have who've run the gamut in the kinds of cases that they've handled. I know how hard it is for people to make ends meet, coming to me and wanting me to help them with a pro bono case. I've done it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. I know people that have suffered injustice in criminal cases like that, and in family cases, and in even probate matters where maybe if they are able to be successful, they'll be able to get a fair share of their parents' estate. It means something to me. It means something to me as part of this community, and it's worth a pay cut to be able to be part of that. And I enjoy, and I will enjoy that experience. And I think that I can make a difference and make a contribution to our community.
It's been an incredible privilege to serve the people of Champaign County. And that's the key word in there is service. And when I applied, it was a substantial application process. And I didn't go into it thinking I'm the perfect fit. I just knew that, as I mentioned my children earlier, we raised them that you lead by serving. And I knew there was a need there. And we were at the point where the children had gotten older to where, yes, we could have remained comfortable, but I could have also demonstrated that there's a need there. Let me see if I could serve. Didn't know. Filled out that application with 40 reference points, was vetted by a citizen committee, subject to public comment, interviewed by them, and then interviewed by Justice Rita Garment, who has stellar reputation and as our Illinois Supreme Court Justice. At the time she retired in July, was the longest tenured judge. And I trusted that her judgment would be appropriate. State of Illinois trusted her judgment all those years. And then when I was selected and I've actually done the job, people have asked, what's the one thing that surprised you? How great the need has been. And I wouldn't want to continue if I wasn't doing the job well, because that would be a disservice to the county. We've raised our children here. We have a responsibility to give back. And if I'm not doing the appropriate job or the right job, then I don't want to be in it. If I was firmly convinced that I was not the best person for this job, I wouldn't have worked this hard. And you've seen maybe at every event throughout our county, regardless of where it's at, regardless, because I serve every person in this county without any type of favor, but with impartiality, because that's what we deserve as citizens, to protect all of us.
We have time for one more.
All right. Well, if that is all, thank you both so much for being here tonight, and thank you everyone for coming. And we'd also like to thank the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, and the News Gazette for sponsoring this forum. And thank you to our timer for keeping us on schedule.
And closing statements.
Yes, go right ahead.
Yes.
The people of Champaign County have an important decision to make. They need to decide whether they're a rubber stamp or whether they are acting in judgment over the people that will judge them. The Supreme Court selects judges who fill out a term for another circuit judge who has retired at a time when there's not an election that's coming up. And that's happened 5 out of the last 6 times in Champaign County. Each time, except this one last time, that person has been a Republican. And the 20 times before that, I looked it up, by that same Supreme Court justice, it was a Republican. And that's fine, because it's their choice to do that. And the real question is that what you want? Do you want to be a rubber stamp for the Supreme Court? You can. That could absolutely be your role. And remember that when you do that, you then become part of that process for who those judges select, because they will go out and they'll select associate judges who are not elected. Fortunately, you can have the best of both worlds, because as a person who's been in practice for 25 years and has handled every kind of case there is, including family law, including probate and criminal and civil trials and appellate work, I have that experience. I have that experience right here, born and raised, part of this community. It's entirely up to you what kind of a judiciary you have. It's entirely up to you what kind of government you have. But whatever you do, be active, be part of this process. This is a very important election cycle. There are very important issues beyond what you are seeing here that are at stake. Issues ranging from who's gonna count your votes, to who's gonna be your sheriff, to who's gonna represent you on the county board, who's gonna be your congressperson, and how does that person fit into the national discussion? Judges are a small part of that. This is a small part of that, but it's also an important part of that. And who sits in judgment over you? That's about the most important thing there is. Thank you very much for your attention tonight. Again, my appreciation to the 4 organizations that organized this event, and thank you to Mr. Limitato for participating in this with me.
Well, I've already served in this role for Champaign County as circuit judge for more than 2 years. I respect the Illinois Supreme Court and the merit selection process. I respect the citizen committee that considered my application, amongst other applications as well. You have an opportunity, like a judge does, to hear all the evidence and to consider the evidence. So I do urge you to do your research. If you haven't met me in an event, I'm sure you will, because I've not hidden. I've not been shy about saying, I want to meet and know what the concerns are of the citizens I serve, because I'm a public servant. I've come only from private practice before this, but I wanted to apply the same principles that apply there: customer service, efficiency, effectiveness. I know we're not a for-profit industry at the courthouse, and nor should we, but we should still put the interest of others first. And that has been something I've done both inside the courthouse and outside the courthouse. If you follow me on social media, if you've seen my website, judgelimitato.com, you know that I am working with local schools, I'm working with civic organizations, I'm working with students to provide hope for the future. Because without hope, people will perish. And we have to give a purpose to that. And I feel like and know that there are more options outside of the courthouse for our citizens than there are within the courthouse. So that's where I've been so determined to make the most of this opportunity, to leave a lasting legacy that goes beyond whether I continue to serve as judge. My hope is that I continue to serve for many years to come, but that certainly I've done it diligently and well to this point. You also have other objective evidence. You can look up the ISBA evaluations, both from this cycle and from evaluations in the past, if you want to compare it to what has taken place in their method and methodology that they've used. I'll respect and adhere to my judicial oath. Our incoming Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice Tice, who's coming in October, just issued a video today through the Illinois Judicial Association, and it talks about judicial independence. And one of the things that she says, a judges take an oath to make decisions based on the law and facts, and without regard to their politics, feelings, personal beliefs, special interests, or public opinion. I think that we all need to be focused on finding public servants who serve all of the people, not just one demographic or the other, not just one political affiliation or the other, but will be fair and impartial to all, unswervingly, staying in their lane in the job that they do. And so I want to thank you for having us tonight. Thank you very much.